Hello guys, welcome back to our tutorial series. In this very tutorial, I want us to talk about a very important concept in HTML, and that is elements. Okay. In the previous lecture, we talked about tags, elements, and attributes. And we said a tag has an opening and a closing end, and then an element is consists of the opening tag, the content within the tag, and then the closing tag, okay, which you see here. And then we talked about attributes, and basically attributes simply adds some extra information or some extra, where we can say, functionality to our elements. Okay, for example, in this very example here, we have title equals text, um, which gives like a tooltip feature to this text when it displays on a page. Okay, so one more thing, we said that an attribute has a name, which is the title in this case, and a value. Okay, now let's go on to talk about elements. Okay, so we've looked at what element is. Essentially consists of an opening tag, a closing tag, and the content inserted between the tags. So this is a classical example of an element. Okay, now we are here to discuss types of elements. So there are essentially two kinds of elements. The first is the block level element, and the second is inline element. Now let's see what those are. Block level elements essentially are elements that have a number of properties. One is that they always start on a new line, and they take up the full width available, okay, on the browser or on the screen in which they display. Okay, so in other words, they stretch out from the left of the page to the right end of the page. Okay, so example of block level elements is the paragraph tag, heading tag, forms, unordered list, and this very one I have not actually mentioned it before, but this is a div tag. Okay, so div essentially stands for division. In other words, it helps us to divide our page into different sections. Okay, we're going to go to the practical aspect of explaining what these two kinds of elements are. Okay, so don't be afraid, and then I'll leave a link in the description that will show you a resource where you can see more examples of block level elements. So these are not the only examples, there are a number of them. All right, let's go to the next one, inline elements. So essentially, an inline element doesn't need to take up the whole line on which it is written. It only takes up the space it requires. In other words, it only takes up as much width as it requires. And example of inline elements are link tag, which is the A tag, the bold tag, inputs, buttons, images, and this very one we haven't talked about, the span tag. Okay, but we're going to look at it in the practical aspect. So basically, these are the two types of tags that two types of elements that exists, and let's get into practical and see how they behave. All right, so we opened up our code editor and our web browser, Chrome browser, and let's get to coding and see the difference between the block level elements and the inline elements. So remember, we introduced you to a new tag, the div tag. So that's essentially what we use to divide our pages into different sections. Yeah. So I'm going to write a div tag. Okay, so div, and then I'll close it up. So as usual, my code editor knows that it needs to generate a closing tag for me, so no problems. One more thing is I'm going to add a comment, and I'll say types of elements, or I'll say block level elements here. So block. Okay. So I've created a div tag. Yeah. Now within this div tag, so this div tag is just to tell my browser that, look, this is a different section. Okay. So essentially, I within this div tag, I would add a paragraph tag. Remember, the paragraph tag is a block level element, as we said, okay, because it starts on a new line. So I'll say I'll do my paragraph tag and I'll tab it. Now I'll say, okay, before then, let me just use a heading. Okay, I think a heading is more suitable. So I'll say h tag, and yeah, so I'll say heading, and then I'll save. All right, I'll refresh my page, and of course you can see that this is heading. Now I would go just below it, and I would add a paragraph tag and say welcome to HTML tutorial, and then I'll save. Now we said that a block level element starts on a new line and takes up the whole width of the page. Okay, so I'm going to refresh, and as you can see, welcome to HTML starts on an entirely new line. And if I add another element to this div tag, okay, it goes on a new line. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a link. So I'll say a tag, and then I'll say click me, right? And then I'll save. Now because the paragraph tag is a block level element, it has taken the whole space on the whole width of the browser. If I refresh the page, you see click me is on another line, and click me essentially is a link. Now remember that a link is an inline element. In other words, it doesn't take up the whole space. So if I add another link to this, if I add another link below this first link, click me, instead of going to the new line, it will just be beside this click me. So that's an inline element. In other words, it will be in line with this very first link. So now let's do it and see. So I'll add another link, and I'll say second link, and then I'll save. All right, now let's refresh the page, and as you can see, second link appears in line with the first link, which is click me. All right, another example of an inline tag, is an input tag. So if I add an input now, so input, and I tab it, okay, and say input type of text, but then I'll give it a placeholder of username, and then I'll save. Now what do you think would happen if I refresh the page? The link tag is an example of an inline tag. The input tag is also an example of an inline tag. Now what do you think would happen? All right, I know you guessed it already, but let's see. So it's going to just be in line with these very previous two links. Okay, all right, now let's do one more so that we can get it clear. Now what if I add another paragraph, and I say this is another paragraph, and then I save. Now I know you can probably guess what will happen, because remember, paragraph tag is a block level element. What do you think would happen? Would it be on the same line, or would it take up a new line? All right, I know you guessed right, but let's see. So it takes up a new line, okay, because it's a block level element. So essentially, a block level element takes up the full width of the page, while an inline element just takes up the space it needs. And then if you add another element, it doesn't push that element to the next line. In other words, you can line them up on a single section of the page. So essentially, that's essentially the difference between a block level element and an inline element. When we start, getting our hands dirty, building websites, we would really get into using div tags and other tags, span tags, and all of that. So there are more tags that we'll get to meet in the future as we advance in the course. So Thank you so much for watching this particular tutorial. See you in the next one.